responsible for our engagements with the African Union and also our engagements in the Africa and European Union Research and Innovation Partnership. Before that, before my current role, I was an assistant director at the Department of Science and Innovation. So I've been a civil servant since 2013, which is quite a long time, but I really do enjoy what I'm doing. Prior to that, I was with the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation at the Union Buildings, and I was specifically headhunted to work on the 20-year review, which was a study that basically reviewed South Africa's democracy 20 years into democracy. So that's just a little bit about myself. And yes, I'm looking forward to the discussions. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Tinyiko. 10 years in civil service. I'll come to you now, Bongeni.
Right. Hi, everyone. Sanbonani. The name is Mbongeni Alan Makubane. And I was at Rhodes, Kaya, rather, let's start with that. Is a small town called Escott, MJZ in KZN. And I was at Rhodes in 2008 through to about 2016. I finished though my degrees in 2012. I did a Bachelor of Arts and majoring in philosophy, politics, and law, and then did the postgraduate diploma in international relations. Ulisha and I were in the same class back then. I think that was in 2012. And right now, I am Deputy Headmaster at St. John's College in Johannesburg, which is a boys' school, and I am the Head of Transformation and Community Engagement here. And yeah, it's been quite a journey. Between finishing my undergrad and leaving Grahamstown, I worked at Rhodes. So my first job was at Rhodes University at the international office, where I was international events and programs coordinator, and did a lot of work and grew in the institutional culture space at Rhodes. So that's been a snapshot of the journey so far. Yeah, good to be here, and thank you, Prof.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mbongeni. Kotyelwa, you are next.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Doc. Hi, everyone. Also, the panelists that are alumni and to everyone in the room. I am Kotyelwa Chimlongo. I'm from East London, in the Eastern Cape, so quite close to Efeni. That's where I was born and raised. That's where I grew up. High school in one place. I've practically never left the Eastern Cape before I started working in Joburg. I did my undergrad in politics and economics. I started at Rhodes in 2015, where I did my undergrad in politics and economics with picking up sociology and German and psychology at some point. So a whole mixture of things before I decided that actually politics and economics is what I wanted to do. But then in honors, I decided to choose my first love and go straight into politics and focus on that. So I did my honors in 2018. And after that, I then decided to also enroll for my MA in 2019, where I focused quite heavily on African feminism and citizenship studies, my thesis being around Xhosa widows and how they navigate their lives after the mourning period. Where Dr. Magadya was actually my co-supervisor along with Dr. Shingi Mtero for that thesis. I now work for an organization called Future Elect. We are a nonprofit that basically runs leadership programs across the continent to be able to train and equip a new generation of ethical leaders on the continent. I am the programs assistant at Future Elect, so that's been pretty fun. I've been there for about a year now, just over a year. Before that, I was working for a nonprofit as well, but based in Cape Town, called the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation, where I did a lot of anti-racism and gender justice and reconciliation work. So my thing, I think, has always kind of propelled me towards the political arena. Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Kotyelwa. So we have a variety of people, some like Mbongeni, who started their careers at Rhodes, others 10 years in civil service, others in think tanks, leadership organizations at a year on, Kotielo, you were saying. So yes, so we bring in a menu of experience, I want to say. Thank you so much, Kotielo. We conclude with you, David, with the introductions. Can't hear you, David. We can't hear a thing. Okay, now we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can
Great.
hear you.
Okay,
As you were
cool. I
breathing
was
heavily.
taking off my mic. Great. Thank you, Prof. First of all, for having us today. It's such an honor to see Eden Grove and familiar faces, and you, Prof. My name is David Willema. I was born in Zambia, so I am Zambian, a Southern African country. I was at Rhodes from 2014. I left in 2019. So my undergrad was in anthropology and politics, and then I did my honors in politics as well. Thereafter, I worked briefly. Actually, my journey starts at Rhodes. My professional journey starts at Rhodes. It's like a coming home for me of sorts, this panel, because I have people like Bongeni, Alan here on the panel who have been very influential in my development professionally and personally, actually. So I began volunteering at the international office during my undergrad years, and then thereafter became a graduate assistant. And then I also worked as a research assistant in the Environmental Learning and Research Center at Rhodes on a project called One Ocean Hub. And basically how I got in there was through, I am known to speak a bit sometimes. So I don't know, somebody picked that up and they needed research assistants and they needed somebody with an international relations perspective. So I was recommended, got into that, enjoyed it quite deeply, to the point that I had conversations with Prof. Magadla during my honors to sort of synergize that work with my honors work. And that was the beginning, really. Thereafter, I worked briefly in Zambia at an organization called Caritas, the Zambia branch. This was in 2021, working as a provincial coordinator in the Democracy and Governance Unit. So basically, 2021 was a big year for Zambia as it was an election year. So it was a lot of that kind of work. And then shortly after I joined where I am now, I work at the Institute for Security Studies as a research officer on maritime security. So basically the ISS works as a think tank. We're headquartered in Pretoria, but have offices in Addis Ababa, Dakar, Nairobi, and we have smaller offices as well in Nigeria. So we work to advance human security on the continent through policy research, technical capacity, and all sorts of tools that we use. So I work on the Maritime Project, and we work with the African Union, the regional economic organizations, and national governments to build the capacity to respond to maritime issues across the continent. So yeah, that's a brief snapshot about me. And Tiniko, I will contact you afterwards because we have work to do. Thank you.
We're making contacts on this webinar. So let's actually go to the second question by starting with you, David. So we'll use a reverse order. Can you tell us?
Prof, I am done. Thank you.
No. Yes. I'm saying I'm asking the second question, and I would like you to be the first person to respond to it by telling us a bit more about how your politics degree is helping you, or how are you drawing on your politics degree in your work at the Institute for Security Studies as a maritime researcher. Did you hear that, David? You are muted.
I missed that, yeah.
Yes. So the question is, how are you using your politics degree in your current position?
Oh, great. It starts with me.
Yes,
Awesome. Great. So as a student, I was always interested in African positioning in with the multilateral negotiations. And we had courses, Africa in the New Wars, taught by Dr. McAdler, international relations itself, African political economy, and all the theories that ground you as a politics student from your undergrad years. And I think combining all those together, I use those in my everyday work. I work in a research environment, and it's very fast paced. You have to apply yourself on different topics, especially working in the maritime domain. It's a mixture of law, of international law, international maritime law, which sometimes you have to learn on the job. It's African political economy. It is also from, if you're a student at Rhodes, I think that the one thing that you learn is that your work matters, and you have to advance an African voice from an international relations perspective. So, for example, if today, a few days ago, at the UN, a new high seas treaty was agreed upon in principle by many countries. This is basically, the high seas are areas in the ocean beyond national jurisdiction where no country owns that space. So then what you learn there is that African, and this is something that is not spoken about, but African countries have played a role in the formation of international maritime law from the beginning, when it was adopted in 1982. To these negotiations now, in December, just at the close of the workspace, I was invited to attend the 40th anniversary of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea at the AU headquarters in Addis. And I learned 2 days before that I had to give a presentation on Africa's role in that. And imagine now that the shock in your body 2 days before you're ready to go on holiday, and you go back to all the principles that you learned as a politics student in terms of Africa's positioning in multilateral institutions and things about pursuing African agency. And it's just so interesting that not long after leaving Rhodes, after being in the tutorial rooms, in the seminar rooms that you are in right now, at the African Union, speaking on African agency in things that are binding and have an effect, an impact, not only for us in this generation, but for the next generations of Africans. And so it's just keeping in mind that what you're doing is very important and it's going to be applied every day in your work life. It might not be the exact same things, but the foundation is the same. It is similar. So it's, for me, it's about developing a passion, an understanding of your why you're doing the work that you're doing, why you're studying what you're studying, and what you can contribute to this world, because we all have a contribution to make. So in a nutshell, that's what I would say, how I apply what I learned at Rhodes in my everyday work.
Sure, it's very powerful. Thank you for that. And I like this framing. You learn to advance an African voice. And how do you do that if you haven't studied? You know, you are expected to give a presentation about a whole continent in 2 days, right? And so sometimes I get the feeling that students think they will begin to study when they get the degree. But actually, once you start to work, they expect that you've done the reading. Now you must apply, right? So thank you so much for that, David. We'll come to you, Xokelwa.
Sure. Thanks so much, Doc. I think for me, one of the main things that I took away from studying politics is critical thinking and also how to speak to people. Because I think so in my line of work right now, like I said before, I'm the programs assistant at Future Elect, and we work quite often with politicians to get them on board with our programs, number one, and also to get them to come and speak to our fellows and our cohort of students. So I am constantly having to, approach politicians and get my foot in the door and get, all of their people to agree for them to come and to conceptualize this program, right? And so definitely, I think critical thinking and knowing how to speak to people, knowing how to go up to someone and basically pitch the thing to them in 2 minutes and say, listen, this is what we need, this is what we're doing, and this is how we'd like you to help, right? So I think definitely studying politics taught me that, especially during my time doing my field work for my master's thesis, where I had to, speak to multiple women in the Eastern Cape, in rural and township areas of the Eastern Cape. And I had to go up to them and let them know what it is that I'm trying to do with this research and where they fit into it. So knowing how to speak to people, I think the politics degree really prepared me for that, and getting what you need out of the conversation with people. Yeah, that's been super important for me.
Sure. I like that, getting what you need out of the conversation, learning to speak to people across the levels, what we call in South Africa, ordinary people, the women that we're talking about, and the politicians. How do you get a worthwhile conversation across all of those people? Thank you so much, Xokelwa. Bongeni, we come to you.
Thanks so much, Prof. Thank you. I feel so rich. I feel like I'm in class. I'm also learning and just getting to go back. So thank you very much to the panel as well. I think there's a couple of things for me, just in terms of the content of the degree itself, right? Has played a huge role, and I'm gonna play between content and skill set. The discipline of reading. I think it was a huge thing that has continued to serve me long after school. And I think of quite a number of people here on this particular call who helped me with that discipline, whether it was you, Prof, whether it was Dinigo as my tutor, Lisa as my colleague. There were a number of readings and discussions, and I think that discipline of reading is really important, and it's a muscle. So it's not just, they're not just isolated readers. It's a muscle that you develop and you build over time. That's important. That serves me continually still. I loved how David phrased the advancement of the African voice, because I think in much of the work that I've done here, I'm in independent schooling. I'm also having a bit of an existential crisis listening to colleagues and peers who are out in the public sector. And I'm like, I need to go back to the public sector. But in the private sector, there's a lot of conversations, and particularly private independent education, around how we develop curricula to be Afrocentric, to be thoughtful of, and the content of one of the courses that really changed my life was Africa in the New Wars, again, that David referenced, that we did, and whether we were doing the Liberia women's movement, whether we were critically engaging Dambisa Moyo back then on Dead Aid, and a number of other theorists and readers, was that now forms much of what is the foundations of the social justice curricula that we're forming today. So to be able to expose, so what I'm trying to do really is take a BA and turn it a high school course, which is quite difficult and impossible to do, but really to start having children read and be exposed to ideas. So the content of the reading that we did in philosophy and politics and law has merged really well for me in a job that didn't exist when I was when I was sitting in Barrett 1. There was no head of transformation in independent schools back in that time. But the work that I do now, I draw from my degrees all the time, from the reading that I did in African philosophy, in how we allow children to read deeply about consciousness. And what's also been quite critical is critical thinking and conceptions of power, understanding power. A big contributor to my formation that I think apply today, and really to figure out what it means for us to understand the humanities as one of the best places to understand the world around us, the powers within it, and how to advance a just and more loving society. And so it's been critical to continue reading and to remember and pull up old readings from old folders, from Politics 3 and from postgrad folders, and to say, I remember that, we've read it before, and to share that with my students now, and to read the body of work that's been developed since as well. That in many ways, that the skill set of being of reading in a BA, from a critical thinking point of view, from an analysis point of view. I won't forget one moment, Prof, I think we were in your class in 2010, and we must have been doing democracy and maybe reflecting on Swaziland or Eswatini now. And I think we critiqued the question itself, and we're like, why is there a presumption that democracy is the most ideal form of governance? And I remember that was quite a changing, there was a turning point for us then, in beginning to take all of the education and the reading that we'd done and to be critical of all the things that we were engaging with, including the questions themselves that we were wrestling with. And that's remained relevant and important for me even now. So in lots of things, just in terms of what you're reading, but also what your reading teaches you. The skill sets that it gives you, the critical thinking, the analysis, the reading. I can't stress the reading enough. Yeah, that's it for me.
Thank you so much, Mbongi. And I like this point about the intersection between reading, so having the discipline of reading, but the skill set, and which sounds like character. What kind of human being do we want out of this institution? And I must say, I'm okay with you not being in government and being in the schools, because we are always complaining as academics. Professor Matthews, who taught everyone in this room, is here at Barrett. And we are always asking ourselves, are the students ready, for life at the university? And what you are doing, Bongeni, is to prepare them for these questions. Why it matters to think about power, to think about justice. What kind of a human being do we want at all these levels? Or as within our community, but also what kind of human being do we want to lead us, and how do we think about leading and leadership in the first place? So thank you so much. A BA in the high schools is something I can absolutely support. Thank you. Am I coming to you, Tinyiko? Please go ahead. And I will say, Bongeni was saying that Tinyiko was his tutor. Some of us in this room happened to have attended someone's wedding years ago. One of them is in Paris, one of them is at St. John's, and we all attended Tinyiko's wedding. So we'll talk about community building across time shortly. Please go ahead, Tinyiko.
Thank you. I think for me, I guess this is not really a pity, it's a good thing, because I think what David, Togelwa, and Ellen have said kind of encompasses everything that I was actually going to say in preparing for this panel. But maybe just a couple of pointers. And I think the other element of the question, what kind of citizens should we be based on where we've come from in terms of what we've studied, is very important. So I think for me, my time at Rhodes, what really was a paradigm shift especially in terms of my sense of destiny and my sense of purpose, was a course which I did. I think it was during my third year. That was back in 2008. Sounds like many moons ago. And this was a course with Sally Matthews, and it was called Thinking Africa. And it really introduced me to the idea that Africa is really a melting pot of opportunities. And it is a melting pot that has got a lot of potential. And when I say that that course was a paradigm shift for me, it also revealed some of the stereotypical thinking that I had about Africa, but also the stereotypical thinking that you kind of inadvertently pick up about yourself as a Black person, especially in the post-apartheid South Africa environment. So that course really also instilled a sense of destiny in me, in the sense that I knew that wherever I was going, it had to do with Africa, and whatever I would do in terms of my career, there would be a strong interface with Africa. And it's almost as though everything pointed in the direction of Africa. And when I look at where I am right now, yes, I'm working for the South African government in the science and innovation space, but my focus is on Africa, and basically positioning South Africa as a leader in the continent. And also being able to position Africa as a region which is increasingly becoming important. I think the other element about, you know, my days as a student at Rhodes was just the ability of being able to be self-reflexive. So placing myself in everything that I was doing, especially in terms of the studies, the theories that I came across, and being able to identify myself and my thinking within that. And so I think one of the strong characteristics that really was built up and developed within me during my time at Rhodes, which I think now is actually my superpower in the workplace, is my ability to think. And I really think that this is something that has set me apart from a lot of other people, not to be comparative, but I do feel that my ability to think, and this is something which started at Rhodes, it started with simple activities like tutorials. That is actually my superpower in the workplace. That's what sets me apart from everyone else. And I mean, the essays that we did, the ability to critically reflect, the ability to apply your mind, these are characteristics which I think have become very important in my career. And I really, I find myself quite a lot in the workplace, being the person who's requested to kind of respond to difficult issues and respond to difficult questions that we need to answer. And the advantage really is that it has really propelled me right at the center of policymaking. And so in our department, for instance, where I work, there was a drive a couple of years ago to include younger people in policymaking processes. So recently, what that meant for me was being requested to actually form part of a team that was drafting the decadal plan for the Department of Science and Innovation. And this plan basically responds to our white paper on science and technology. And my role was specifically around a chapter on internationalization. And I think all of this started at Rhodes. My love for writing, it started at Rhodes with my master's degree, which I also did with Sally Matthews, and I'm glad she's in the room. And it's been a full circle moment for me, and even just being able to speak about these experiences is a good way to reflect on how far one has come. And I also just want to bring out something else, which I think is very important for students right now. I think that when we look at the state of South Africa, it may seem like there is a lot which is going wrong, but I do still believe that there's a great future that lies ahead. And one of the key taglines, the tagline for Rhodes is "Where leaders learn." And this is something which I have carried with me since the early days of my career. And I really think that leadership it's not about the position that you occupy. It is the way that you think. It's the dynamism that you bring in how you think. It's so for me, it's also the patriotism that I have towards my country, even during these very challenging times. And so you might be a student right now and feel that there aren't many opportunities. The unemployment rate is incredibly high, but everything that you are experiencing at Rhodes, just simply because of the way in which the courses are formulated, you might find that once you do step into the working environment, you are 5 steps, 10 steps ahead of your peers. So I really think that just the simple things about life at Rhodes, whether it is attending tutorials or it is writing essays and having to submit them on time, or it is societies that you participate in, one thing which I would have to say is that you really need to be intentional, especially during the current season that we find ourselves in as a country. There's a need to be very intentional and to really insert yourself in all of that and really draw meaning from it, because it will really frame your journey in terms of your career, your purpose, and your destiny, which I think is very important. Thank you very much.
Oh, so powerful, so powerful. Thank you so much. And I love this thinking as my superpower. I think that's really amazing. And I think I don't expect anyone who's in this room to ever miss a tutorial, because really you've made the case for us. It matters 5 years, 10 years on, it matters what you do, the everyday, you know, really the beauty, the glory is in the habits themselves. And this is where you build the habits. So thank you so much, Tinyiko, for that. We'll come to you, Caden, and then Lihle.
Without sounding like a broken record, I'll try and be as concise as possible. There's only one real point that I want to speak about today. And I think for me, the biggest thing that I learned was definitely subjectivity and seeing the bigger picture. And that's something that I think this degree definitely helped me in a lot. I mean, you know, any prof, any lecturer, any tutorial, or any tutor will tell you that you can't write a good argumentative essay without examining a counter argument. You can't see and engage with people from different mindsets without actually hearing what they have to say and not just dismissing and not just taking your personal bias. And obviously working in parliament and working in research, I mean, you're dealing with quite literally ministers, you're dealing with honorary members in parliament. This morning, I was drafting a statement alongside our Secretary General, Brett Heron, to deal with the hate crime and hate speech bill that is going to be spoken about in Parliament today. And, you know, like when you are engaging with these topics, you might have your own internal bias, you might have your own internal history, you might have your own internal thoughts about who this should benefit, who this should exclude, for example. And obviously when you're dealing with in this politics game that this country finds itself as it moves towards a more coalition-focused government next year, it's really important to be able to see everyone at the table and listen to their perspectives and acknowledge them, and also to be able to have the dignity and the self-respect to be able to say, hey, I was wrong, or hey, my perspective can change and I can be educated, because we're all learning and we are all getting better. And as youth, we are the ones who are passionate. We're the ones who are going to have to take the slap on the wrist or my bad, my mistake. And a lot of the times you can get so disappointed or so just upset and self-reflective and self-critical over those things, when in reality, if you look at it subjectively and if you look at it in a big picture sense, that is a learning experience. And every single time that you are refreshing your mind and refreshing your mindset, you're only going to become a better worker and a better thinker in this environment.
Wonderful. I mean, what you, Caden, and Tinyuka have shown is how critical thinking is an asset for policy making, about hate speech, about internationalization. It matters in the very real sense. And, you know, all of you are making me, you know, also think about the fact that, you know, we are the adults now. You know, there's no time to say others will make the decisions. We are those people. You know, if this country falls, and Tinyuka was speaking about this point, we are at a time of crisis, right? Bongeni earlier talked about Lima Bowie, you know, during the war in Liberia, and Bowie would say, you know, trouble is coming. You know, we are heading for trouble, and we are the people that make the decision about where the country goes. So you showed that quite clearly. Thank you so much, Caden, but also the importance of learning with people that you disagree with, but also changing your own views, which I think is very important. So thank you so much for that, Lihle.
Thank you very much, Prof. I also echo the sentiments shared by the colleagues. Before I go into my answer, I think I didn't do justice to what I do and how I came into the department, which will help me answer the question if I explain it. So if I may, I just want to explain that I joined the Department of International Relations as a cadet for the cadet program that trains diplomats. Thereafter, I then worked in the Policy Research and Analysis Unit, and then the African Union desk before I was posted in France. I mentioned the cadet program because it was my entry point to diplomacy. And I found it was then when I got into that program, it really became clear to me how much my educational background influenced me and the foundations I had built that prepared me for that role. For example, at a technical level, for example, we had to undergo a very grueling training program, which was also largely academic, but more of an occupational training kind of program. But one of the things that I appreciated from having studied at Rhodes, particularly in the politics department, was my lack of fear to engage, even when I would be the one holding an opinion that is not popular. When I noticed around with my colleagues in class in the training program, because it was a way of getting in and a way of making sure that after the program you do get employed. And so a lot of people sometimes would be reticent to say things that would seemingly be controversial. But I came from a culture of learning that demanded that I speak the truth and I say what I think, but also to listen to others who have a different opinion to myself. And also a culture that allowed me to practice engagement of different ideas in debate in the space of learning. So that really helped me to be present and to really be fully participating in my program as I came into diplomacy. And I've held on to that, which I felt is something that has helped me also to hold on to my sense of freedom in terms of my freedom to think in an environment that is very conservative in many ways. In a lot of times, it is not always welcome for you to always express what it is that you think and what you believe in, or at least not in any way, but just being rooted in that belief that my voice matters, and what I believe to be right and to be true should find expression somehow, and should be heard even when people disagree with me. So that was one of the most important things that I took with me from my training at Rhodes University. At an ideological perspective, I really appreciated how Africa-centric our training in international relations was. I think David has also explained it quite well, how that also has influenced him. But it's quite important especially being a practitioner and a practicing diplomat, because South Africa's foreign policy is also Afrocentric, right? At the core, South Africa's foreign policy is to also advance the African agenda. So when your own ideological foundations are also based on that coming in, you don't have to be convinced why this is important. You already understand and all the layers that come with it and the nuances that come with it. So that has been my North Star in how I practice, in how I'm a practitioner in my work. So those have been some of the ways in which that have really influenced me in how I do my work in the present day. I must also mention, I think it was because, I don't know whether it was because it was my first course in IR in politics, but the security development course that UProf taught has always gave me a framing for how I look at politics in general and how I work. It just has always been a way which I go back to, as Mbongeni also mentioned, in terms of we go back to the old readings. That is one of the things that has really anchored me in helping me. It just helps me keep sight of what is right and what is wrong in the way in which we think about things. So for me, those are the things that have really influenced me. But also in terms of outside of the classroom and how I lived my life as a student was one of the things that really helped me to be ready for the world in a sense. And I think that may be something that we may discuss later, but I thought that it was quite important how I learned to sit with different people and spend time with different people throughout my university career, through my extracurricular activities, in my volunteer work, people from different backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds, racial backgrounds, different countries, etc. It exposed me to a whole lot of different people who come from different upbringings or hold different perspectives with different experiences. And that taught me to really expand my own perspective and to see other people's experiences as they are, not necessarily how I experience things, and to also understand that certain things, different things can be true for different people, and we can learn to disagree or to find the middle ground, but to maintain respect in all of that. So for me, that is how the university experience has shaped me and how I apply that in my area of work on a day-to-day basis.
So I like that. Thank you so much. And it might sound like you are, these things you're speaking about, there's a tension between standing for your own beliefs, but also understanding and believing that different things can be true at once. So it might seem like a tension, but actually it's not. If you allow yourself as a student to interact with different people, really embrace the diversity of the university, because it prepares you for the world. There is a term in government that people use, that sometimes there are career limiting views that one might express in a meeting, but you are all providing us an example that actually it is important to stand for what one believes to be right and wrong. I do have, thank you, Lihle. I do have some more questions, but we have 3 minutes to go. I want to just ask us if we can please end 2:05. I know that the next lecture is at 2:15. Do we have a burning question for our alumni that we ask that question and then they will make closing remarks? I see Ndigana, is that you? can you quickly move? Maybe you can just project and then I'll ask the question. The question is, how much are you earning? Wow, wow, wow. What is the salary? The pay? No. Okay. Do we have another burning question? Yes, please, Marco. Go ahead. Okay, so please note this, alumni, because we have one goal, right? So you respond to all of these questions. How did you make the initial step from university life to work life? And then there's a question, yes, please go ahead. Tell me your name. Lily, so go ahead. Lily so is asking, Litle, how did you move from academic life to diplomacy? There's a final question here. Tell me your name. Zenande. Zenani. Okay. Okay, so they're asking for your contact details. I'm assuming emails, social media for the people that have social media. Yes, okay. Yeah, so that's fine. The question, if I can just add this question about how do you build community? Seems quite big, but actually how did you deal with disappointments as a student? And how did that prepare you for life as an adult? I think this is important. Having community and learning to deal with disappointments. So please engage the questions. We have 30 seconds per person. Can I start with you, Gotyelwa?
I was not expecting you to start with me, but I'll go ahead. I think that the question of, I'll start with the question of dealing with disappointments and community. And I think David will speak to this as well, because we're still, I think we maintain that we were in our honors together, and we've really maintained that as a cohort to really post our studies. But I think in the department, what really helped attending those lunchtime seminars and meeting new people there, forming groups, forming writing groups. I know for me, when I was doing my MA, colleagues that were really helpful for me, such as Ozi Kota, who would work together, even via Zoom, just to make sure that we keep the momentum going, sharing readings with one another. And I think that sense of community that moves beyond just the academic space, but is able to hold you even long after. Because when you've made the transition, particularly from Grahamstown to another city, a different city, which for me was Joburg, it can be quite isolating and alienating, especially if you don't know many people. But being sure to just reach out to your people and find that sense of community was super important. Yeah, and I think that even leads to that question of how did I make the initial step from varsity to work? Making sure that you keep your community. Don't burn your bridges, don't lose your people along the way. You need people. You actually can't do any journey really in this adulting thing alone. You will need the people around you. So make sure that you keep on cultivating your networks of community.
Very nice. Let's not cancel people. Don't burn your bridges. I like that very much. I will come to you, Mbongeni, and maybe some here might be interested to know that Mbongeni is a former SRC president. How do you build community, become an SRC president, deal with disappointments? Go ahead.
Don't do it, guys. Don't do it. Building community has been, I think, two things, and I'll weave the dealing with disappointment into that. Community shaped and made rich my Rhodes experience profoundly. It was in the middle of the night. She might not remember it, when I knocked on Lisha's door, trying to figure out some career moves around wanting to make the world a better place. And I was always this dreamy kind of a person, and who gave me quite tangible structural practical advice about how to go about doing it. People here on this call, Prof, there are many people, Sally, Prof Matthews, a number of people who have invested and bothered. And I guess with the disappointment is that there's sometimes disappointment of dealing with the disappointment of not achieving the things that you want, but also of not always maintaining the relationships that you need to. Big regret for me is not being in touch with the people I want to be in touch with as much. And I would say keep relationships. Relationships matter. Though they're important, people are important. And so as you build that community of people who don't just sound or think like you, but who are invested in thinking about the things that you're thinking about, and who grow your world, who expand it, that matters. And the ability to birth or to move rather from student life into community, into broader society, keeping those relationships, and not get overwhelmed with the traffic of being an adult in new worlds. And that's been a big thing. How the traffic of adulting overwhelmed me, and relationships broke, and I miss friends, and I'm sad about that. So in some ways, dealing with disappointment has had to come with forgiving myself and mustering the courage to write emails of forgiveness, and that those basic human things are critical to just as you come into adulthood, come into your career, and to be kind to yourself as you seek the questions. As I was registering for my master's, Pogazi said, do you have the question that will keep you going? And I stopped actually because I didn't have the question. So those things were really critical. And I think community for me remains a groundedness in a community of people who hold, account, share, deepen, and challenge you. And to forgive yourself when that breaks, and to take steps as actively as you can to restore it, or just to live in peace with yourself as well.
Thank you so much. Forgiving ourselves matters. I think I really like that. We have 15 seconds for our last speakers. It's 2:05 now. Lithe, go, and after you, it's Caden with Tinyiko, David. 10 seconds,
All right.
please.
Wow. Okay, I will try to be concise. Thank you, Prof. To the question of how did we make the transition from university to the workplace, and how did I make the move to diplomacy, I'll merge that into one answer. Quickly, so I was unemployed for 8 months after graduating from Rhodes, 3 qualifications later. So it happens because the economy is tough. It is not a reflection on you. It might happen to the best of you. So just to be realistic, so that happened to me. I was searching, and eventually a friend shared an advert. We found somewhere, and I applied, and I got into the program. And so that was why my move into diplomacy. And to the question of community and disappointments, I think my colleagues here on the panel have answered the question in terms of university and the community that you built. I do want to speak about disappointment in the workplace. Nothing prepares you for that. I think as someone who wears my heart on my sleeve about purpose and service, and to sometimes get into an environment that sometimes can be harsh, and maybe sometimes you feel like people are not sharing the same feelings as you do. So that can be quite disappointing. But a few weeks ago, I just learned something very important that I just want to share quickly. Is that
it's 2:07.
Hands up.
I'm so sorry to do this to you.
I'm sorry, it's okay.
We have a colleague that must set up in a few minutes.
Okay, no problem.
But we receive it. The students must be prepared to deal with disagreement and disappointments in the workplace. I really appreciate it. Caden and Tinyiko, can we all schedule another session? Because now problems, we have a timetable, the traffic of adulting, as was said. We thank you so much. We thank you, all of you, for giving us your time. And we will, I hope it's okay, we will share your work contacts with the students. I hope that's okay. And they will then pursue these questions with you. Thank you and all the best. You are adulting well. You are making us so proud. Cheers. Please clap for our guests.
Cheers, Prof.
Thank you, God.
Thanks,
Okay,
everyone.
bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Thank
very
you so
much.
much, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye, guys.